And actually walking it and being able to ask questions. I'll ask you questions. We'll all try to figure stuff out together. My name's Craig Sharton. I have multiple roles in downtown, but for this I am a contractor with the Downtown Fresno Partnership, which is our property owners association. And let's see, so today is going to be a little different, which is a good thing, because we'll be going through the construction site and we can certainly talk about that, but we did that really in depth last month. We had the city's construction manager for the project with us, and even though I'm coordinating with the contractor and the businesses and the property owners, I learned a ton of stuff. It was just incredibly informative, and of course you guys had great questions. Today is a little different because we have a downtown specific plan called the Fulton Corridor Specific Plan and the Downtown Neighborhood Community Plan, which addresses planning issues around downtown, and the new Downtown Development Code, which sits inside of the new City Development Code. And so this is really key. I told the mayor early on the two main things we have to do. Let's do the Fulton Street project right, and let's change all the bad planning that has either prevented developers from wanting to do anything down here or delivered projects that don't necessarily help revitalization. And so we started on them a long time ago, took kind of a break during the general plan, and now it's up and running again. It goes to the Planning Commission October 10th, 12th. I wondered why it was on a Monday. I put it on the calendar, October 12th. Yep. So, and it's out for public review right now. So you can download it, you can make comments, you can read about it, you can ask questions and all of that. So it's really a great time to sort of mold it to make sure that it's a community plan. So something I noticed a long time ago is that when developers want to do something, the community gets together and fights it because we usually don't like what they're doing. And so there's this constant battle between developers and the community. When the community develops a plan and then developers build something according to the plan the community wanted, now there's a partnership between the community and developers, because now developers are implementing what you said you wanted. And then we can celebrate new developments downtown instead of constantly battling with each other. It's a very different dynamic that most communities aren't used to. It takes a little practice to actually realize we're all working together if we all get engaged in it, rather than battling and complaining every time something starts to happen. And I'm guilty of that too. I don't like some of the development and I get mad about it. So now we get to make the rules work for us. And we have a special person today as our guest that I'll start by introducing. He is one of the planners that I've met all across the country that I would say gets it to the core of who he is. He is an urban planner by nature, not just by training. And he spent a lot of his time volunteering in the Tower District when he was a young planner with the city of Fresno, really helping with some of the positive changes there. Then he went up to Redwood City, which is probably one of the last holdouts, at least in the South Bay or Peninsula kind of area, of a city that didn't revitalize. When he got there, it still looked like it was 1959 and nothing had changed. And Dan worked in Redwood City, and now it's one of the great models of a rebirth of a downtown and a city. And he got to, as a Fresno guy, get out and try his hand somewhere else and learn a lot of things. And the really great part is that he's brought that knowledge back to Fresno. And we're very lucky to have him battling the battles inside of City Hall. If you think it's hard to battle City Hall from the outside, battling it on the inside is 10 times harder, right, Alfred? So we're lucky to have him back here. He's overseeing these planning projects and the development code projects. And let's give him a round of applause. We need boomerangs.
Thanks, Craig.
So this is Zack, everyone, and he'll be sort of guiding it. I'll be helping. We'll be kind of co-leading this today. But really, we want to know more from Dan. One thing I'll ask you to do is when you have a question, don't ask me or Dan as we're walking. Ask it in front of everyone else so that everyone can hear it, and we won't be answering the same questions over and over again. And there's a real human tendency. We'll talk here and then walk, and then you guys will ask us really great questions that no one else can hear the question or the answer. So hold on to those questions and ask them as we stop along the way, if you would. All right, Dan.
Well, thanks, Craig. This is great to see such a good turnout. You know, it's really exciting to be back in my hometown and working on this stuff. When I was involved as a citizen activist in the Tower District, you know, 15 years ago or so, one thing I noticed was that we had this cool specific plan for the neighborhood that talked about how Olive should be walkable and mixed use and parking should be tucked behind and everything that made sense and jived with what was on the ground already that everybody loved. And I was on a planning committee for the neighborhood, but I was the only one that had any urban planning background. So my first thing was, okay, we've got this great plan. What's the zoning say? So I went to the zoning district, and the zoning district was, the zoning for the area was basically strip mall zoning. No residential allowed, huge parking lots required. You have to have a suburban landscape setback right along Olive Avenue. It just didn't make sense. And so for a long time, I've been eager to kind of reform the way we do zoning in the city of Fresno, and now I've been able to have a hand in rewriting all of it, which has been a pretty surreal experience all these years later. And downtown is going to be the crown jewel of that whole effort that we've been going on. You know, I've been involved the last 2 years, and other folks like Craig and Elliot were involved for years before that. This is about it. We're finally done. Before I get too deep into it, I'm going to pass around these little cards that we created for a workshop a few weeks ago, and it has a website where you can look at the downtown plans and actually see what's in them for yourself and check them out. And then on this side, it's got an email address where if you have any comments, hey, you guys ought to maybe think about changing this or tweaking that, you can give us those comments. We're out for public comment right now. We want to know what people think. We want it to be great. We want everyone to love it. And then it has our city council and planning commission dates too. And so if you think this is a great idea, we'd love for you to show up and show your support to the city council, because they appreciate that, and so do we. So I'll just pass these out. Maybe this direction, and that direction, and put some in the middle here. So yeah, check it all out. Now, you know, 25 years ago across the U.S., there started to be you know, various movements that were trying to get us kind of back to the future with our cities. Congress for the New Urbanism, Smart Growth America, you know, groups like that, even Urban Land Institute, American Planning Association started getting in on it. And the idea was, hey, look, you know, we need to get back to our urban cores and make them walkable again, and not be afraid to have density and to mixed uses. And these places started reviving all across the country. I mean, right now, Brooklyn is the poster child for hipsterdom, but you know, 30 years ago, it was, you know, the poster child for urban decline, right? And all across the country, places are coming back. I was just in Detroit. Detroit is coming back in the core. It was amazing to see all the construction and all the pedestrians, and so there's this big revival. But in the 50s and 60s, the U.S. was obsessed with trying to stamp those places out. We thought that was bad. It was unhealthy for people to live on top of a market or a coffee shop, or even a bar. Wouldn't that just be the worst? And you know, free and abundant surface parking everywhere was the #1 goal in life. And so the idea was to really try to decentralize our cities, thin out those dense urban cores, and separate work and living and play. Fresno was a big part of that wave. In fact, Fresno was the first city in the U.S., I learned, that had a parking requirement in its zoning ordinance. So, you know, we were the first one to mandate that developers pave over part of their land in order to have, you know, free off-street parking, which now is common across the country. So, we were part of that big movement to decentralize, thin out, and stamp out urbanism. by the 90s, it was hip again, and cities were moving that direction, and Fresno was slow to adopt, although people one by one started waking up to it around here. But our code banned it, and so anybody who wanted to come down here and do a cool mixed-use building and put it at the back of the sidewalk and maybe have less parking than North Fresno was going to have a really hard time. In the 2000s, there was a patch made to the old zoning to allow mixed use in commercial zones with a conditional use permit, but you had to pay serious fees. The approval was not guaranteed. You know, the city could deny it if they just didn't like the look of it. And all of your development standards, the height limit, the parking, the setbacks, all this stuff was negotiable. None of it was clearly laid out. So it was a really dicey proposition. Even though it was technically decriminalized, it was still really dicey for a developer. You know, how much are you going to pay for the land? You don't even know how much you can fit on there, what's going to be allowed, if it'll be allowed at all. So what this represents now with this new downtown development code and the Fulton corridor specific plan is now the buildings that we see here, mixed use, sidewalk oriented buildings, denser, taller buildings, really walkable buildings. That is now going to be the norm instead of the exception. And this is going to be the path of least resistance. And somebody wanting to do a suburban style office park or strip mall downtown, not going to be able to do it. That's actually not going to be allowed. We want to start doing downtown again in downtown. So it's really exciting. When I was in Redwood City, we did a similar thing. They went from getting about 100 apartments built downtown per decade to now with some public improvements that they made, plus this zoning reform like we're doing now, they've had about 2,000 units so far this decade, and this decade's only about halfway through. So that regulatory reform can really help make a difference. And you know, whatever market forces you have going in your favor, it helps unleash them so that you can really achieve your goals and your dreams. And so we're just about there. It's really exciting. The Fulton corridor specific plan, which is also at that hyperlink that's on the card, shows in addition to kind of just the big picture vision of, okay, what kind of downtown are we going to be when we grow up, it also has a really aggressive program of catalytic projects that the city is going to try to partner with the private sector on to really get the ball rolling in terms of, hey, if we had housing here, if we had a hotel here, that could really kickstart things. And so it gives us a good to-do list of things that, if we could do these 5 things or these 10 things, that would really get the ball rolling. And kind of, you know, get the market forces rolling, so then that way the city can step out, not have to be involved financially in every project, and we can really get a good building boom going down here. And then it also has a really detailed program of infrastructure improvements. So not only underground infrastructure like sewer, water, storm, and that kind of stuff, but also above ground. You know, which streets should have bike lanes? How are we going to finance that kind of stuff? Where do we need to widen sidewalks? Where do we need to break up a 1960s super block and restore our original walkable street grid? And a system for getting those things all in place too. So that really is complementary and builds off of, you know, the development code, and they all work really well together. So, you know, when it's all in place, we'll hopefully have a system where the public sector is making strategic investments that really make the place more desirable, more attractive, more comfortable. And then a private sector that can work really well under the development code and build things that the public is excited about, that get us incrementally closer to our goal, and that are also just successful on their own as development projects. And so, you know, you put that all in a pot and simmer and stir, and hopefully, you know, over the next couple of years, you know, my goal is very humble. I just think we're on target to build the next great American downtown. So with that, I guess unless there's anything else we want to talk about now, we could start walking and go from there.
Questions?
What do you think?
Anyone have any questions as we get started, John?
Is there going to be a design review committee?
How will design review work?
So what we've tried to do is bake into the code the range of design things that we want to see to take the uncertainty out of it. So, you know, whenever you're doing a zoning ordinance or some sort of city code, there are 2 forces tugging at each other, and one is, you know, flexibility, which is nice to have, and one is certainty, which is also nice to have. And so we are erring on the side of certainty, so that it's much easier to get projects designed and approved and for people that are thinking about building here to know what kinds of things we would approve without a lot of guesswork. So, so we talk about, okay, how much of the ground floor needs to be glass? How do you need to arrange the facade of the building? What kinds of materials, what are allowed or not allowed? And so a lot of the guesswork that sometimes comes with design review committees is taken out of it. And through all the work, especially that Craig and Elliot and other folks did in the early stages with all the public outreach, hey, what do we want downtown to look like? What buildings do we like? What buildings aren't quite right? And what should new ones be like? That was baked into the code up front, so that the downside of the design review committees is, typically those codes are more loose, and then you take it to the design review committee and work out a design there. We want to have a really streamlined process so that the development community can have predictability, and they can know exactly what range of things. There's a lot of different things you could do. There's a range, but if you're in that range, we're going to approve you pretty quickly. And if you're outside of that range, then maybe we'll have to pull in some design review. If you want to propose something outside of the norm, it's possible. There are processes for that. It's going to be slower, and if you want to be creative, then you could do that. But we have a preset range of things that we know will work, and those things aren't going to have to go through design review. They're going to get a really quick approval. So developers that play ball and give us what we've already determined we want, they get right through. And that in my last experience really helped take developers who were leery about getting into an area that had been shunned for a long time and really prime the pump. And what they're experiencing up there is, after 30 years of the redevelopment agency having to subsidize every building that came into that downtown, now all of the buildings under construction are privately financed, and that means those city resources aren't going into subsidizing private apartment buildings and office buildings. It's all privately financed, and the city can put its resources elsewhere, public spaces and things like that. So we do have for alternative kind of designs, a design review option set up where there's that kind of process. But for people that follow the guidelines that we've laid out in advance, they get right through.
Anyone else? Questions? All right, well, let's actually just come out here to the corner.